Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down House of the Dragon. The Battle of Rooks Rest is finally here, and your boy Aegon's getting cooked. We have a big shocking death as well, and yeah, lots of things to talk about tonight. Throughout this video we're going to go through the episode and, as always, go over the book differences. There's some slight changes that actually make a major difference, with Aemond's actions being drastically left field. So come with me and bend the knee, because in this video we're going through it all. Now, one thing I didn't point out last week is that we actually have some additional shots added into the title sequence. Towards the end we get two brand new sewings in the tapestries, with the first of these showing baby Jaehaerys. He's then beheaded, oh no, and we then lead into the repercussions of this. Next up is Cheese hanging, which is a fate that he ended up receiving. Now we begin in one of Daemon's visions with another cameo from Millie Alcock. Entering the throne room at the Red Keep, we can see at the top one of the columns is the previous king. When doing our trailer breakdown, I did think this might be Viserys, however we know he's on a different one. These are put up in the wake of a monarch's death, with Viserys' one appearing in the season premiere. It's difficult to make out exactly who this is, but either way, it symbolises a lot. We later learn Daemon's clearly dealing with the succession, and that he still holds a lot of pain over Rhaenyra being named the heir. Now, I love the way that this shot is framed, as it shows the previous kings looking down on him. I do kind of wish it was Viserys though, as it would have that extra layer of symbolism, because his brother's looking down on him. Either way, this is then further hammered home by the fact the throne's raised with Rhaenyra on it. She's in the position of power, whereas Daemon's wandering through the hall in what seems like common folk clothes. He also initially can't understand Rhaenyra's High Valyrian, showing further detachment from the Highborn. However, we have sat and translated what she says before the subtitles, and she says, "Like and subscribe, and Rhaenyra's a chump, shut the fuck up Rhaenyra." After that though, the words start to come into play. Now this is a flip on the first time Rhaenyra and Daemon met in the show. There she approached the throne whilst he sat in it, and the pair conversed in High Valyrian. He said the throne could be his one day, but it's reversed here with her sitting in it. We also see the red on black Targaryen banners, which have now been replaced with the green and gold in real life. This is something mentioned in the work, with the book saying the gold dragon was modelled after Sunfire. Sunfire is who we see towards the end, but take him down, mate, take him down. Now, it's going to be okay, we'll talk about it later on. Now, the dress she has on is something that Alcock's version never actually wore. This appeared at the end of Season 1, with it being what Rhaenyra was wearing in the final shot. She also has Jaehaerys' crown, which was placed upon her head during that episode. Jaehaerys ushered in the longest age of peace in the realm, and this was further carried on by Viserys. He also wore that crown too, so you can start to see why she wanted to broker a truce last week. This is something they touch upon later, and it's perfectly juxtaposed by Aegon. Aegon wears Aegon the Conqueror's crown, and he carries his black armor and his black sword Blackfire. Aegon the Conqueror was of course more about war, so you have these two sides reflected in their crowns. Now Rhaenyra tells Daemon he created her, and this could be a reference to her nickname, now known as Rhaenyra the Cruelest, reputations purely down to his actions. Early on when she was introduced in the work, she was nicknamed the Realm's Delight, with her being extremely popular during her younger years. However, when the war began, things quickly changed and she was known as several other things. This included the Pretender, the Whore of Dragonstone, and also King Maegor with teats. Maegor was nicknamed Maegor the Cruel, and the entire Blood and Cheese arc changed how she was viewed. Rhaenyra is obviously a manifestation of Daemon's thoughts, so she's more in tune with what he actually thinks. She points out he's set on destroying her, and I do wonder if they're going to have him try and oust her. It's not something that appeared in the works, but it adds a lot of dynamics to their relationship. It's something the real Rhaenyra suspects herself, and Corlys and Rhaenys discuss this as well. Now, this idea of him destroying her is something Daemon leans into, with him beheading the Vision. During their first meeting, he put a necklace around her neck, whereas here he's swinging a sword at it. This idea of beheading has been laced throughout the season, with Blood and Cheese doing it to Jaehaerys. Though not intentionally his fault, he did hire them for revenge on a royal son, and thus it all led to where we are now. I don't even feel like he fully regretted it, because he was sat around the table smug. Look like when you fought at the dinner table, yeah, and your mum and girlfriend are there, and you just wait for them to smell it. She looked at him exactly like that. Be there before. Anyway, he then had a vision of Rhaenyra stitching this back on, so the idea of beheading is very, very poignant. This is also the exact same spot where he beheaded Aemond.
And she is a whore.
It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Beyond that though, the most obvious one is the fact that this is where Jon killed Dany. Dany and Jon were auntie and nephew, so it's a flip on the uncle and niece thing with Daemon. Dreams and foresight of the future are something that a lot of Targaryens possess. Daenerys the Dreamer predicted doom with the family then moving out of Valyria. Aegon dreamt of the prince who was promised, with Viserys dreaming of a son being sat on the throne. Helena has been completely plagued by them, and in Game of Thrones Season 2, Dany had one as well. She actually saw her demise, which I think the scene with Daemon somewhat predicting. These scenes are of course open to interpretation, so let me know below exactly what you think. Anyway, the head talks to him and she says there's been a raven, which then wakes him up. In what a really nice bit of attention to detail, you may also spot that he has blood on his hands. However, when he flips this around, we see that it's completely gone. Personally, I think this shows the reality of these dreams and how they go beyond just being parts of a character's imagination. They have basis in reality and obviously represent the blood on Daemon's hands. However, him having blood here after decapitating Rhaenyra ties into her words saying that this is what he wants. In order to take the throne, he's gonna have to cross the line, and asks whether his desire outweighs his duty. Now, shoutouts to our editor Matt for saying this could also be a reference to Macbeth. Blood was shown on his hands after the killing of Duncan. The phrase blood on your hands originates from the Bible with Cain and Abel, though the Shakespearean play further pushes the notion. Alice Rivers later on has a Scottish accent, with Macbeth also being referred to as the Scottish play. The witches in that also possessed one as well, with it tying the tale to the Shakespearean play. Awoken by Sir Simon Strong, we hear the news that plays upon this passage in the book. With 100 knights and 500 men-at-arms of the royal household, augmented by 3 times as many hardened sellswords, Sir Criston marched on Rosbury and Stokeworth, whose lords had only recently repented their allegiance to the Queen, commanding them to prove their loyalty by adding their power to his own. Thus augmented, Cole's host advanced upon the walled harbour town of Duskendale, where they took the defenders by surprise. The town was sacked, the ships in the harbour set afire, Lord Darkland beheaded. His household knights in garrison were given the choice between swearing their swords to King Aegon or sharing their lord's fate. Most chose the former. Also, yeah, I've got a bit of a cold coming on, so my voice is a bit ruined, but actually sounds alright when I'm reading that stuff, yeah? Just hit the thumbs up, please. I've got a cold. Now we see the scene playing out later in the episode when Sir Criston beheads Lord Darkland. I love this shot where he walks along and we see all the soldiers bending the knee. Because of this, Criston's now tripled his army, and I love how Sir Simon talks about how they don't have much of an army as we pan over to you, the GOAT, because you hit the thumbs up. No, but beyond that, a black gold is often used to represent the occult. This has been seen in religion, several tales and legends, and even recently in Robert Eggers' The Witch. This subtly plays upon the power of Alice Rivers, and though they might not have an army, something else is here. Now in the halls, we meet Oscar Tully, who's the grandson to Grover Tully. Grover is someone whose name's repeatedly popped up, with them constantly mentioning his age. We will talk about him more in the spoiler section at the end of the video, where we'll also go more in depth on how he plays in Rosbury and Stokeworth. Edmure Tully appeared in the main series, and his family are an important part of the realm. Oscar's a little wet behind the ears though, but that doesn't really matter to Daemon. All that Daemon cares about is an army, and he even suggests that Oscar murders his grandfather. Now he won't do this, so we know that Oscar's father died, and thus he was raised by Grover. Another reason he goes against this is because family's really important to the Tullys. Catelyn Stark is even quoted as saying, "Family, duty, honour, every Tully child learns our words, but I was a woman before I understood them." This idea was seen prominently in Brynden Tully, who follows how things should be. Nicknamed Blackfish, this tied into the silver trout sigil that we see Oscar wearing. Brynden got the nickname Blackfish as a family joke because he was accused of being the black goat of the family. We use the phrase black sheep, but in Westeros they have the phrase black goat. However, with the family sigil being a trout, they changed the name to Blackfish, and thus you have several things from the scene all tying together. I don't actually think I even reached there, you know. And we also hear about the Blackwoods and Brackens, who we saw at the start of last episode. This was the Battle of the Burning Mill, with Daemon requesting the Blackwoods accompany them. This leaves Oscar out of it, but yeah, I think what happens with Grover will become more important down the line. Cutting across to Rhaenys, we get what is the princess's last episode. Having lost both her children, she then has a bit of a tender moment with Adam. Although he's not her child, she shows some fondness to him due to his likeness to Corlys. He of course saved her husband's life, but I feel the gratitude goes beyond that. Instantly recognizing him, she urges Corlys to raise him as royalty. There has been a lot of back and forth with the pair, with conversations even starting in season 1. All Corlys cares about his names and legacy, and this has made him blind to what's in front of him. Like remember when he was trying to ship his daughter off with Viserys? Bit weird that, mate. He's clearly well aware the Strongs aren't related either, but he made Luke the heir to Driftmark.
It remembers names.
On the opposite side of this, Rhaenys has been urging him to bring Rhaenyra and Baelor into things, and he's now doing the same with Alan. Alan! It's a shame as their time's cut short, with her death being absolutely devastating. Cutting over to Alicent, we see her looking at a model of the Black Dread. This is the one she gave Viserys, and it's a gift that showed she really cared about him. It's one of the last things that remains of the king, with it probably being one of his favourite possessions. The Black Dread was the dragon he rode, and he never took another after his death. However, Alicent drops this, and it shatters the wing, symbolising the breaking of the family after the death of Viserys. Broken dragons falling from the sky, of course, also foreshadows the battle at the end, as she's requested some Plan T, which is something that appeared twice in Season 1. Rhaenyra took it, and then Alicent forced it upon the girl that Aegon assaulted, with it basically being a liquid version of the morning after pill. We missed her last week, but she actually appeared at the Cock-Inn, and it highlighted the fate that she'd been subjected to. She ends up drinking it due to what's happened with Criston, but he hasn't been in the castle for some time now. The way she rubs her stomach makes me wonder how far along she is, and they might introduce a wild card with her character. This is just me theorising though, as she was never pregnant at this point in the book. Still though, this highlights she doesn't want any more kids, and this is for a number of reasons. Obviously, people would have questions if she suddenly got pregnant after her husband's death, but kids are now also being drafted into the war. That's something they touched upon last week, with children being the main victims so far. So it makes sense that she's taking every precaution because things are about to get ugly. Asking whether Viserys actually wanted Aegon to succeed him, she's clearly showing doubt over the conversation last week. Maester Orwell says it was never raised to him, and everyone's just blindly following off the back of what she claimed. In the book, they didn't even have that scene at his bed, and it was solely about usurping Rhaenyra. Here though, Alicent gets way more of a human side and is clearly doubting her actions. Cutting to Dragonstone, we hear of Baelor scouting and how she spotted Criston last week. They're clearly playing off Dany's counsel in the main series, and on the whole, they're just as ineffective. The council bickers back and forth, with Rhaenys being the one who's pretty much leading it. This is something that builds off the book, with it describing her leading the council in Rhaenyra's absence. The bird arrived when Rhaenyra and her blacks were mourning Sir Eric, and debating the proper response to Aegon the Usurper's latest attack. Though shaken by this attempt on her life, or the lives of her sons, the Queen was still reluctant to attack King's Landing. Munkin, who it must be remembered wrote many years later, says this was because of her horror of kinslaying. Maegor the Cruel had slain his own nephew Aegon, and had been cursed thereafter until he bled his life away upon his stolen throne. Septon Eustace claims Rhaenyra had a mother's heart that made her reluctant to risk the lives of her remaining sons. Mushroom alone was present for these councils, however, and the fool insists that Rhaenyra was still so grief-stricken over the death of her son Lucerys that she absented herself from the war council, giving over her command to the Sea Snake and his wife Princess Rhaenys. Aegon makes a big entrance during the meeting, with him saying they need to stop clawing for power at the council and learn to work together. Corlys has been sat on several councils before, with him being the master of ships on Viserys's. Cutting across to the walled harbour town of Duskendale, we see several sigils. The red stripes belong to the Rosebreeze, with the white sheep being the Stokeworths. Now this is what I believe is the first time Criston's been referred to as the Kingmaker, with Darkland spitting at his feet as he says it.
Fuck to and spit on that name!
He also says he's not fit to wear the white cloak, which is something Criston's grappled with throughout the show. He broke his oath to be with Rhaenyra, with white cloaks swearing not to be with a woman. They're supposed to represent honesty and purity, and it's meant to be something that makes them above other men. Even when hooking up with Alicent, he still took a lot of care with the cloak, making sure it was folded up. With Arik, he lambasted him for having a dirty one, but all he boils down to is being a hypocrite. He calls Darkland a traitor, but as we know, he's the one who betrayed his queen. Darkland's final words are,
"Yours will come in kind."
And I hope it does, mate. I hope the lad gets a brutal death, you son of a bitch. Receiving an ode, I felt like the silence here kind of played off of Daemon in the first season during episode 3. There he received a note from Viserys asking him to come home before he went and captured the Stepstones. This happened just before a big battle in Victory, with this setting up the one for the Greens. We never find out who it's from exactly, but it is obviously Aemond. At the council, he takes charge and demonstrates things on the map. Now the map and the points on it look similar to the coins on the map the pair plotted at during episode 1. They were just stopped by Otto there, but now he's completely out the picture. It's clear he's undermining his brother, which we see during the next scene. Talking in High Valyrian, I don't even think Aegon knows what he's saying, and he stumbles over his reply. No one is telling Aegon anything, and he's gutted about Harrenhal. Larys doesn't see it as a loss though, because he controls the gold there, and it's not exactly bristling with forces. Larys says,
"It's like to drive Daemon to madness as he attempts to make use of it."
Now, not only is this literally driving him to madness because of this, but he's also of course bewitched by Alice Rivers. His sole purpose is to make sure he defeats Daemon, and he puts him 6 feet deep after making him toast. Like soul defeat 6 feet toast. Foot puns on deck, mate. Larys says it's all part of the plan, with Rhaenyra seemingly being stuck on Dragonstone and Daemon out at Harrenhal. This has allowed Criston to take several castles. If they take Rooks Rest, it cuts off Dragonstone severely, making Aegon look stupid. It plays into the fear that Larys brought up last week, that Aemond and Alicent were planning to rule in his stead. We'll talk about the aftermath of Rooks Rest later on, but a lot of the pieces are falling into place. He clearly wants his brother out of the picture, and even does friendly fire, like actual friendly fire, on him later. This is something that wasn't in the work, and it shows that there's an extra power play afoot. Put your dick away, Larys, not a foot like that. I realize something that's fascinated the character, and even at the coronation he was staring at Aegon, clearly wishing it was him. This is what makes him the perfect opposite to Daemon, as the pair both think they should rule. George clearly wanted us to look at them as if they were similar, and if you take the D from the start of Daemon and put it at the end, you of course get Aemond. See kids, learn something new every week. Jumping back to Alicent, we see her basically creating what I think may be a hot stone massage. These are used to ease muscles and rebuild damaged soft tissue. I was thinking this might lead into another foot scene, but thankfully we don't get Quentin Tarantino's favourite season 2 scene. Larys is clearly probing about her relationship with Sir Criston though, and he also asks about her looking through the books.
"I did not know you shared your lord husband's love for the histories."
Now this could likely be her trying to find out, if anything, about Aegon's dreams written down. As we know though, this was secretly passed through the line of kings without lastly being told to Rhaenyra. The only place it's inscribed is within the cat's paw dagger, and the family don't yet know how to read it. This blade was actually invented for the show, with it not appearing in any of Fire and Blood. I do wonder if we will get to a point though where dragons attack and one of the family goes to use it. If they're burned while holding it, the others could see it and thus finally realize what's going on. How about what's likely going to happen is that it just won't get passed on, and this is why the threat from the North's ignored. However, Rhaenyra does pass it on to Jace in this episode though, as if she dies, then he's the next in line. The prophecy is one of the most interesting aspects of the series for me, because we really don't know what way it's going to go. Larys also seems like he knows Viserys didn't really change his mind, and Alicent's just resigned to the war playing out. She says,
"The significance of Viserys' intentions died with him."
With basically laying it all out for you there, love. Viserys was a peaceful king who inherited peace from Jaehaerys. As we mentioned earlier with the crown, the guy was all about avoiding war. So look, yeah, I doubt in his last moments that he was saying something that was gonna destroy everything. It shows Alicent didn't really know her husband, and highlights the damage that secrets can do in a family. Travelling back to Harrenhal, we once more find Daemon disturbed in his slumber. I love the way this thing's shot, as it feels like a horror movie with the damn castle walls and water dripping down. Last week we saw feet through the cracks under the door, and I was wondering if it was one of Larys's. That's repeated here though, and Daemon follows a figure through the castle who's later revealed to be what initially seems to be Aemond. However, taking a closer look reveals this is Matt Smith, highlighting the similarities between the two. It's very much a sort of Luke on Dagobah scene in which he saw his face inside Vader's helmet. It cements how similar the pair are and how interlinked their futures are together. Stumbling across Alice, we then see her working away in what's akin to something out of Sleepy Hollow. Daemon calls her bastard, but the book held some contention over her lineage. Who was this woman? A serving wench who dabbled in potions and spells, says Monkin. A woods witch, claims Septon Eustace. A malign enchantress who bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth, Mushroom would have us believe. Her name suggests a bastard birth. Again tying back to Daemon's line. But we know little of her father and less of her mother. Monkin and Eustace tell us she was sired by Lord Lionel Strong in his callow youth, making her a natural half-sister to his sons Harwin and Larys. But Mushroom insists that she was much older, that she was a wet nurse to both boys, perhaps even to their father a generation earlier. Now she says she's some kind of maester though, she relies more on the dark arts. We see her crafting concoctions that rely on blood, with a work going on to say, though her children had all been stillborn, the milk that flowed so abundantly from the breasts of Alice Rivers had nourished countless babes born of other women at Harrenhal. Was she in truth a witch who lay with demons, bringing forth dead children as payment for the knowledge they gave her? Was she a simple-minded slattern, as Eustace believes, a wanton who used her poisons and potions to bind men to her body and soul? Now she says that Harrenhal has been cursed since its first stone was laid. Shout out to editor Matt again for bringing up that there were rumours that there was even blood in the walls. She also brings up the heart tree, which is something we saw Daemon standing in front of in his visions last week. These weirwood trees are laced with extremely strong materials, which is why they were used for things like beds. The paste from inside the trees also helped to open up Bran's sight in the books. So this could explain the visions, and perhaps sleeping on a bed made from one is why he's having vivid dreams. These visions are skipped over heavily in the work though, with the series really breaking them open. Alice Rivers was at least 40 years of age during the Dance of the Dragons. That much is known. Mushroom makes her even older. All agree that she looked younger than her years, but whether this was simple happenstance or achieved through her practice of the dark arts, men continue to dispute. Whatever her powers, it would seem Daemon Targaryen was immune to them, for little is heard of this supposed sorceress whilst the prince held Harrenhal. Now she taunts Daemon and teases that the legitimacy of the throne never would have been questioned if Daemon was the one in charge. Sipping her potion, he then finds himself with Willem Blackwood and I think we've all drank something and then woke up not really knowing where we are. Now Willem's a character that we've met before, with him appearing at the start of season 1 episode 4. So guys, back for episode 4 of season 2, and he talks about vying for Rhaenyra's hand. Anyway, I think we may refer to him as Samwell in our previous breakdowns, but that's because there was no character named Willem in the book. Willem is thought to be based on Samwell though, who had a duel with Amos Bracken for Rhaenyra's hand. This duel is something he played upon in episode 4 with the young boy killing the Blackstreet boys. He also talks about his Lord bending the knee to Rhaenyra, which was shown at the end of season 1 episode 1. Anyway, around the table he sees a vision of his dead wife Lena, with that being another woman that he caused issues for. To be fair though, out of the three, she didn't come off too bad. He killed his first wife, Lena died, and could be worse, could be Rhaenyra. Anyway, we cut back at the council and see what I'm going to call the decision balls spinning and not falling into place. This symbolically sums up the council, with them being indecisive and unable to lock in a plan. We hear that the small folk are suffering as Vhagar's eating up all the sheep, which builds off the back of that man who ended the king in episode 1. The Lannisters don't have the money to fund the war properly, and it's all just depressing, mate. Aegon finally slams the ball in place and storms out while the council debate without him. This scene is somewhat touched upon in the book just before the Battle of Rooks Rest, though it doesn't properly spell out anything here. However, probably worth reading just in case, mate, as it's a couple of sentences long. Back in King's Landing, King Aegon's master of whisperers, Larys Strong the Clubfoot, had drawn up a list of all those lords who'd gathered on Dragonstone to attend Queen Rhaenyra's coronation and sit on her Black Council. Lord Celtigar and Velaryon had their seats on the island, as Aegon II had no strength at sea. They were beyond the reach of his wrath. Those black lords whose lands were on the mainland enjoyed no protection, however. Now, this then leads into Cole taking the outposts, highlighting how Rhaenyra being on Dragonstone felt like she'd abandoned her supporters. Returning to his room, we see Alicent looking for Viserys' books, but we learn they've been moved. Aegon drinks and drinks, and the work highlights he did this after the death of Jaehaerys. He's frustrated that no one listens to him, and Alicent talks about how respect has to be earned. Wearing the crown isn't enough, and this clearly sits with the character. In the end, this pushes him towards rushing to war, which is a move that he's definitely gonna regret. Alicent also unleashes, as she's been overlooked massively this season. That council in the first episode really summed it up, as she was completely ignored like the thumbs up. You have to remember to hit it though, and also remember that when Viserys was on his last legs, she ruled the realm in his stead. Otto also sat on the Iron Throne, and together the pair looked over the realm. Otto was the hand to 3 kings, and he was extremely successful. Now though, he's been fired in place of Kristen, who, complete dickhead, mate. Sorry, you crap at your job. Alicent doesn't even get invited to the meetings anymore, and she has to hear from Larys what's went down. She also tells him he should
Do simply what is needed of you. Nothing.
Now, Aegon was put on the throne as a figurehead, but he wasn't actually supposed to have any power. He wasn't even interested in ruling, with it really being a position for Otto and Alicent. However, at the end of the day, he still holds power, and this is why he's been able to oust them. This episode is about him trying to prove to himself he can do it, but not even his brother believes in him. Now, that takes us to the Battle of Rooks Rest, which is the season's biggest moment so far. After the paragraph on the beheading of Darklyn, the next one then says, Rooks Rest was Sir Kristen's Aegon's next objective. Forewarned of their coming, Lord Staunton closed his gates and defied the attackers. Behind his walls, his lordships could only watch as his fields and woods and villages were burned, his sheep and cattle and small folk put to the sword. When provisions inside the castle began to run low, he dispatched a raven to Dragonstone, pleading for succor. We see this playing out in the episode as we cut across to the outskirts of the location. Trees are cut down and they prepare for war, with Criston rallying the troops. Attempting to catch them off guard, Criston and the Greens decide to launch the attack during the day. Now Gawain is clearly hesitant about this, and I think the Age of Peace has really made these men out their depths. Because Jaehaerys and Viserys kept the peace, most of the knights haven't seen true battle. Who has though is Criston, which is something they brought up when Rhaenyra selected him as her bodyguard. He was the one who'd actually been in a proper fight, and though he's an idiot on the council, he's not when it comes to war. However, the realm is still pretty screwed because of this, and it links in with who Aegon selected as knights. Rhaenyra called them the Nepo baby knights, and the main bodyguards of the king are clearly out their league. This extends to almost everyone, with Aegon being eager to play dress up as the conqueror and head out into battle. But something just doesn't fit right, which was highlighting the fact the conqueror's armor didn't fit him last week. Over at Dragonstone, we see Rhaenyra returning, and just as she walks in, we hear,
"We need to send a dragon."
Foreshadowing why Rhaenys decides to ride out. Darkland learns of his father's death, but they don't really give the guy time to grieve. Everyone wants to know where Rhaenyra's been, with Jace being furious his mother met with Alicent. These meetings are something that we've seen through both characters' histories, and meeting at the Sept something they've done throughout the seasons. We really see why Rhaenyra had to do it though, as it was a last-ditch attempt to try and keep the peace. She's realised war is inevitable, and now there only remains two paths. Either she dies, or Aegon does.
We need to send a dragon.
Looking down on the meeting, we also see Mysaria. I do wonder if she's playing another game beyond this, as she doesn't really get involved in anything else. She's the master of whisperers, who by very definition has to be a spy. She doesn't do any real betrayals like that in the book, but I did wonder why this shot was inserted here when it doesn't really pay off. She truly serves the small folk though, and sided with Rhaenyra purely because she'd seen that she's kind. Either way, Rhaenys volunteers to go, with the work saying, "Here Mushroom's version seems most likely." But we know that days after Lord Staunton dispatched his pleas for help, the sound of leathern wings was heard across the sea, and the dragon Meleys appeared above Rooks Rest. The Red Queen, she was called, for the scarlet scales that covered her. The membranes of her wings were pink, her crest, horns and claws bright as copper, and on her back, in steel and copper armour, flashed in the sun, rode Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Completely nailed reading that. The book's even upside down, which is a bit of editing magic for you there. Now we cut across to Aegon and get some amazing symbolism. We catch the character pushing a golden glass off the table and can see that there's a little dragon on this. It then falls and shatters, leaving the golden pieces on the floor. This foreshadows his golden dragon Sunfire, who comes crashing to the ground. Now across with Rhaenyra, we see her standing in front of a dragon skull. Being able to get a closer look at this confirms that it's in fact Meraxes. It has popped up in the season before, but we didn't get a proper chance to look at it. However, this indeed confirms that it's the dragon. Now this is due to the damage around its eye, which we know was caused by a scorpion. During 10 AC, she was struck above Hellholt and she fell to the ground, which is also believed to have killed Rhaenys. Rhaenys is like who wrote her. It's the same name, different character, with her being one of Aegon's sister wives. However, the fact the name is this, and Rhaenys later dies falling to the ground along with her dragon, is beautifully set up here. Meraxes even gets mentioned in the section where Rhaenys hits up Rooks Rest, but we'll talk about that later on so it doesn't get confusing. Although Jace wants to ride out and fight, his mother just wants to keep him safe. She says that the Targaryen monarchs are more like protectors and that they've passed on a message down from the kings to the heirs. As we know, this is the Song of Ice and Fire, with her entrusting it to Jace. If something happens to her, then he's the next in line, and yeah, we are starting to see why this prophecy could get lost. I am still kind of surprised Alicent thinks he chose Aegon, because like, the guy got up from his deathbed just to stumble to the throne, just to say Rhaenyra was the heir. Looked like Joe Biden going to a debate. Cut that, we're not going that way, but either way though, it's too late now. And everyone's gonna die. Now in to go with this are the dragons and their riders marching out to battle. Rhaenys is clearly taking it seriously, with her putting her head to Meleys. Juxtaposing this, Aegon drinks and laughs as Sunfire prods him. It's clear he thinks this is a game, and it's basically fuck around and find out. Cutting to Rooks Rest, we see archers mounting the walls, and in the forest, the shields of the Darkland forces now alongside with Roseberry and Stokeworth's. They've switched sides, mate, and if you fancy showing your allegiances, then definitely check out our merch store right below the video. We've got 3 House of Dragon inspired shirts with our blacks and greens one, and also Dragons, Drama and Destiny. If you're watching The Boys, then we've also got ones playing off the classic memes, and if you're enjoying The Acolyte, then the both of you should check out the shirt Sith Happens. I'm just kidding, mate, everyone's having a great time watching The Acolyte. I'm glad MT agreed to cover it, not me though. Don't know if I could be bothered talking about Ki-Adi-Mundi every single week. Now moving on. Anyway, huge thank you to everyone who's picked one up, and again, thanks for all your support. Now Lord Staunton looks over it all, and we see Maelys riding out. Mirroring Sunfire and Aegon, he flies out from the Sept and over King's Landing. Now this next paragraph pretty much describes what happens on screen with arrows raining down. Maelys then arrives and tears things up before Criston puts a plan into action. So Criston was not dismayed. Aegon's hand had expected this, counted on it. Drums beat out a command, and archers rushed forward. Longbowmen and crossbowmen both filling the air with arrows and quarrels. Scorpions were cranked upwards to loose iron bolts of the sort that had once felled Meraxes and Dorne. Again, that's kind of tying back to Meraxes with all the similarities. Maelys suffered a score of hits, but the arrows only served to make her angry. She swept down, spitting fire to the left and right. Knights burned in their saddles as the hair and the hide and harness of their horses went up in flames. Men-at-arms dropped their spears and scattered. Some tried to hide behind their shields, but neither oak nor iron could withstand dragon breath. Sir Criston sat on his white horse shouting, "Aim for the rider!" Through the smoke and flame, Maelys roared, smoke swirling from her nostrils, the stallion kicking in her jaws as tongues of fire engulfed him. Now this is holding it the right way up this time. Now this is perfectly translated to the episode, but there is a slight change up from the work. Then came an answering roar. 2 more winged shapes appeared, the king astride Sunfire the Golden, and his brother Aemond upon Vhagar. Criston Cole had sprung his trap, and Rhaenys had come snatching at the bait. Now the teeth closed around her. So it's clear the history's told the story in a different way, with it seeming more like Aemond and Aegon working together. In the series though, Vhagar goes to rise up, and then Aemond spots his brother. Calling him an idiot, he tells Vhagar to wait, and the dragon then lays back down. Now, I watched this scene a couple of times before writing this part of the script, and I think Aemond does this for strategy reasons. He's happy letting his brother go on the front line, and would rather just hang back and not risk it. He just thinks he's an idiot, and he'll let him get in the way, and doesn't mind even burning him when he's tackling Maelys. Aegon actually believes that his brother's there to help, but hey, that's what you get for bullying him all those years. Now Maelys claws open Sunfire, and we get a really cool detail as this happens. As the claw retracts, you can see smoke coming out the dragon, and then as it flies over the soldiers, the blood pours out like hot oil. Makes it seem like their blood is boiling and hot enough to burn their skin. Now Vhagar arrives and burns Sunfire and Maelys, with the former coming out of it better than Aegon. He plummets to the ground, and we'll talk more about his fate later on this spoiler section. Rhaenys goes to fly away, but she instructs her dragon to return and attack. Taking Vhagar down would obviously be a big win for the Blacks, so there is a motive to why she did this. The work differs slightly though, with her happily turning around to face both dragons. Princess Rhaenys made no attempt to flee. With a glad cry and a crack of her whip, she turned Maelys towards the foe. Against Vhagar alone, she might have had some chance, but against Vhagar and Sunfire together, doom was certain. The dragons met violently 1,000 feet above the field of battle, as balls of fire burst and blossomed so bright that men swore later that the sky was full of suns. Now, we do actually catch soldiers looking up at the pair, with them creating a burning ball in the sky. The crimson jaws of Maelys closed round Sunfire's golden neck for a moment, till Vhagar fell upon them from above. All 3 beasts went spinning towards the ground. They struck the ground so hard that the stones fell from the battlements of Rooks Rest half a league away. Now, as the pair come crashing down, Criston's knocked off his horse and rendered unconscious. This is akin to when Tyrion ended up going into battle and he got knocked out right at the start of it. That was for budgetary reasons though, whereas here we still get to see the fight play out. I love how he stumbles about later and touches a knight on the shoulder, who then falls apart, revealed to be just ash and bone. It really highlights how devastating the war is, and this is why everyone wanted to avoid dragon versus dragon. Now Rhaenys flies back, and Vhagar does another sneak attack. Just in the same way that Lucerys died, the beast springs up and catches the pair off guard. Both rider and dragon lock eyes, and they tumble towards the ground, exploding on impact. The work says, also yeah, I'm just reading this for dramatic effect, yeah? Don't be a dick in the comments, mate, yeah? A body believed to be Rhaenys Targaryen was later found beside the carcass of her dragon, but it was so blackened that no one could be sure it was her. Beloved daughter of Lady Jocelyn Baratheon and Prince Aemond Targaryen faithful wife to Lord Corlys Velaryon, mother and grandmother, the queen who never was, lived fearlessly and died amidst the blood and fire. She was 55 years old. The book also tells us that 800 people died that day, with Aegon's fate being left up in the air. They come across him in Sunfire, which is where the episode ends. Kind of feel like Aemond was maybe going to put him down though, because we see him drawing his sword. This is only halted by Cole, who says,
Aemond!
Aemond then picks up the cat's paw dagger, which is the only thing that holds the Song of Ice and Fire. At least it hasn't been lost though, but yeah, I do wonder what's going to happen. To me though, the character taking this signifies that he's now in charge. Either way, he struts off whilst Aegon lies there, and hey, that's what you get for making fun of his woman last week. Shabao! Now moving across to our thoughts, I think this was a really strong way to close out the midpoint of the season. This year we're just getting 8, but we closed out with what's my favourite episode so far. Blood and Cheese, that let me down, which I've talked about in other videos. However, what didn't let me down was the Battle of Rooks Rest, which I thought delivered on everything I wanted. The build up to it as well, and seeing how everything was leading to war was also expertly handled. So I really enjoyed this episode, and that takes us into the spoiler section. Make sure you check out if you don't want to know what happens in the work, as it could end up spoiling the upcoming episode. Anyway, it tells the fate of Aegon and the aftermath of the battle. Those closest to the dragons did not live to tell the tale. Those farther off could not see for the flame and smoke. It was hours before the fires gutted out, but from those ashes only Vhagar rose unharmed. Meleys was dead, broken by the fall and ripped to pieces upon the ground. And Sunfire, that splendid golden beast, had one wing half torn from his body, whilst his royal rider had suffered broken ribs, a broken hip, and burns that covered half his body. His left arm was the worst. The dragon flame had burned so hot that the king's armor had melted into his flesh. So expect to see a drastically different Aegon, who's completely burned and living the rest of his life in misery. King Aegon II did not die, though his burns brought him such pain that some say he prayed for death. Carried back to King's Landing in a closed litter to hide the extent of his injuries, his grace did not rise from his bed for the rest of the year. Septons prayed for him, maesters attended him with potions and milk of the poppy, but Aegon slept 9 hours out of every 10, waking only long enough to take some meagre nourishment before he slept again. None was allowed to disturb his rest save his mother the Queen Dowager and his hand Sir Criston Cole. His wife never so much as made the attempt, so lost was Helaena in her own grief and madness. The Sunfire is badly damaged too, though the dragon's still alive. However, its crippled wing leaves it unable to fly, and it's too heavy to be carried back to King's Landing, so it just wanders the fields, feeding on the sheep and cattle that exist in the area. Now in the wake of this, Alicent and Aemond take over rule, with Aemond even sitting on the throne. This builds off the back of what Larys said last week, with him spreading rumours it would happen. "You must rule the realm now, until your brother's strong enough to take the crown," the king's hand told Prince Aemond. Nor did Sir Criston need to say it twice, writes Eustace. And so, one-eyed Aemond, the kinslayer, took up the iron and ruby crown of Aegon the Conqueror. "It looks better on me than it ever did on him," the prince proclaimed. Yet Aemond did not assume the style of king, but named himself only protector of the realm and prince regent. Sir Criston Cole remained hand of the king. Now Grover Tully also ends up dying as well, and thus the dynamics of the war change. What I'm really interested in though is what happens with Jace, and we now know why the prophecy gets lost. In case you don't want to know what happens, another spoiler warning, okay? I'm being serious this time, mate. It's a big spoiler, so yeah, check out now if you don't want to know. Okay, you still here? Well, Jace ends up dying in the war, and this explains why the prophecy never gets passed on. I think that's the most devastating thing about this, because there was no real reason for the Targaryens to keep it so close guarded. Had they been more open and had Viserys told Alicent, then this entire war could have been averted. There's no real reason why it couldn't have been told, because all it was doing was preparing the realm. However, this civil war devastates them, and it ensures that Westeros isn't ready for the Night King. So yeah, all the pieces are falling into place now, with the cat's paw dagger now going to Aemond. Potentially he won't even pass this on to anyone else, and it'll end up in the hands of the Lannisters at the start of Season 1. Either way, that's our theories on the future, and obviously I'd love to hear yours. Make sure you drop them below, and huge thank you for bearing with me through the video. My voice is still a bit rough, yeah, and if you watched our trailer breakdown on the episode, then you'll know how bad it was at the start of the week. I don't want to meddle or anything, you know what I mean? I'm just sitting reading a book out to you, but yeah, appreciate. I do want a thumbs up. I don't want to meddle, but I want a thumbs up, because yeah, it's been a nightmare filming this. We've had to do it so many times across several days. Kept the same t-shirt on though, and hopefully you guys didn't notice, but yeah, appreciate all the love. you know what, you guys have really made me feel great the last couple of weeks. It's been nice seeing all your reactions and comments on the video, and it just makes these videos more enjoyable to do, and I know you guys are so passionate about it as well, especially pointing out mistakes I make, which happens, but I appreciate the corrections because it's just nice that you guys know even more than me, and yeah, you guys are top notch, so thank you for all the love. And yeah, I'd love to see your comments this week, so much appreciated. Also, if you want to support the channel as a member of the Spoiler Society, then please click the join button. It's just 99p a month. It's less than $12 a year. That works out, yes? Is that my maths is good for that? But for that, you'll get early access to some videos. You get to support the channel. You know, we're trying to do it where it's an amount that you wouldn't notice missing from your bank account every month, and yeah, just makes a massive difference to us, and hopefully doesn't make much of a difference to you. But appreciate the likes either way. That they're all free to do, obviously, and yeah, thank you for all you guys' support, because you guys are the best. Now, if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown on the boys on screen right now, so definitely head over there right after this. Lots of things going on. We're ramping up to the finale, and yeah, make sure you check that out right now. Go click it. Don't go to bed. Go watch that video instead. You haven't got anything important on tomorrow, do you? Nope. Well, you know what you're gonna do for me. Anyway, huge thank you for clicking this. I've been your host, Paul. You've been the best, mate, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.